Okay, we're going to get started. So welcome to the June meeting of North End Neighborhood Council. This is our first in-person plus virtual meeting. So there may be a few hiccups as we work our way through, but bear with us. Thank you very much, University of Puget Sound, for hosting us. And we're going to work our way through it. Introductions. Do we normally go around the room and introduce everybody? Is that the plan? So I'm Peter Bennett. I'm the chair, and we'll work our way around. So
Jerry Cook, treasurer.
I'm Brad State, vice chair.
like to introduce yourself?
Huh?
Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Lexi McDonald. And I used to be on the board. I don't want to be on the board because I'm old.
I'm Greg Vanguard from Pierce County Health Department.
I'm Joe Teeger, NENC board.
And Jill Jensen, NENC.
Thank you. And those of you that are virtual, we can see your names up on the screen. If you are representing a group and could go in and rename yourself so we can see who you're representing, that may help us down the road. We have a request from Greg from the health department to give his presentation early on. He's got another appointment. So firstly, thank you very much for coming here in person, Greg. And do you want to just come up and give your report? So are we going to?
Is this where I'm at?
Is
That's a good place to be.
Just
Yes.
Or over here.
If you want to be on camera, you have to be over here.
Okay.
But if you don't want to be, you can stay.
So I'll just say hi to everybody.
Hold on one second. My slide.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you very much. I'm Greg Canberra, the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department, and also I'm a resident of the North End here too. So good to see everybody here at UPS. You know, Peter, I don't have anything in particular that I wanted to present to everybody. Maybe a couple of thoughts afterwards, but I wanted to find out if there are any questions for me with regard to the health department or anything related to the health department. So I thought I'd just start there, Peter, if that's okay, real quick.
So I'll start with a question, Greg. So what is the local incidence of COVID right now? Are we midway in the state? Are we high? Are we low? Where are we?
Well, you know, things have been changing especially over the last month or so. Unfortunately, my computer was down today, so I usually try and bring statistics to gatherings like this. But I know that last week, our rates per 100,000 were still moving up a little bit. Hospitalizations are not as high as what they were like a year ago, but they are still pretty high. And I think the message for us is that, you know, we've moved from, I think, a low risk to medium risk a couple of weeks ago. And so cases are up a little bit. I would still encourage people to get vaccinated, get boosted if you're eligible to get boosted. That's very important because those vaccines really are intended to help make sure that you have less of a chance of ending up in the hospital or worse yet, passing away from COVID-19. Many people, and it's not uncommon, many people are having breakthroughs, you know, but they're relatively mild. So that's kind of what we're seeing, Peter, at the health department right now. Yes, question over here.
I got COVID really badly 2 weeks ago.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, me too. It affected me so badly. I didn't recognize what it was until I was just walking clinic. And I got a pax of it, but I've been vaccinated twice, boosted once, wear my mask. But yeah, it's still out there. real bad. I also have emphysema, so my legs are damaged as it is. It's more vulnerable.
Yeah, and so, that reminds me that one of the things too, if folks end up testing positive, you should get a hold of your healthcare provider as soon as possible, because there are therapeutics that are available for folks that are eligible, but they must be started within a few days of when symptoms show up. And so that's what a lot of people are doing, and that would be very helpful. I guess the last thing I'd like to, unless there are other questions, are any other questions? Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, Greg, thanks for being here. First question is, do you know if it's health related, why the Tacoma Spring Fest at Mason School was canceled for the second day?
Ooh, sorry, I don't have the answer to that.
Second one then is, I know many people now who have surprisingly gotten COVID over the last week, all vaccinated. What is the health department's new advice on why this is happening?
There are going to be breakthrough cases. The vaccines that we have were designed primarily to, help people not get as severe symptoms. They're really designed to help keep you out of the hospital and help you from dying from COVID-19. People will catch COVID-19. It's I would really encourage you, if you do test positive or have symptoms and test and end up testing positive, that you report that. That's very helpful to the health department. Gives them an opportunity to do some contact tracing and that sort of thing. I know people that have been getting notices over the telephone about potential contacts also. So my suggestion from the health department would be, just know that the coronavirus is still out there. The variants are still spreading. The variant that we So I hope that answered the question.
Any more questions? Oh, I put mine on mute and that muted. I apologize to everybody. I thought I was muting myself and I was muting Greg. So
Yeah, we apologize. That was an inadvertent mute. Greg, could you just repeat that last response briefly?
Okay, real briefly.
Real brief.
I think the question was, what is the recommendations from the health department with all of the breakthrough cases? Just know that is happening right now. I also know people who have been gotten up to date on their vaccines, gotten boosted, and they have had COVID also. Fortunately for them, I think that those vaccines and getting boosted help make sure that their symptoms were not as severe as they might have been. None of them have landed in the hospital or gotten very, very sick. So that's the thing that I would like to convey to people, that it is out there. Take your mask with you. If you feel like you need to use it, please use it. And if you feel that the folks that you're visiting with would like you to wear this, please put it on also. Okay.
one more question.
Is it true that it's going to be continuing to exist in our world, but at a lesser level, kind of like the flu?
It's really hard to predict what's going to happen in the future right now. I think that we've learned a lot in the last couple of years. We are much better prepared for what might be coming in the future, whether that's variants or upsurge, those types of things. I know that the pharmaceutical industry is also working on other vaccines that will maybe target some of the variants a little bit more closely. So lots of people are working on this. If I could predict the future, I'd probably be in Vegas right now instead of here. So just know that folks are continuing to work really, really hard on making sure we are just as prepared as possible. We're getting information out through our website to make sure that the public, everybody, has the best information that we have available. And we hope that everybody does their part in being prepared also. Make sure that you've got a small stock of tests, know how to use them when you feel like you need to use them. Any other questions?
No other questions from the online community.
Okay, well, that's what I wanted to primarily do today. And actually the things that I wanted to share with you ended up being folded into the answers to the questions that were offered. I want to tell you again, it's really good to see people. And all of you that are visiting online there, we'll look forward to seeing you in the future. So Peter, thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg.
Okay.
Okay, now we're going to go back to the regular schedule. So starting with announcements, we talk about the various ways you can reach NEC by the email, website, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and text. Jody and I went through some training a couple of weeks ago, so we actually have been able to take back from Sarah the communication about the meetings, which hopefully is working. And we're working on updating the various distribution lists. So those of you that are liaison, you hopefully received a message from me today asking that we had the right email. If you didn't, you could just send me, put something in the chat or send me an email. We are just updating those liaison lists to make sure that they go out. We still have some openings on the board. So any of you that are interested in joining the board, we would be most interested in having you. So reach out to anybody on the board and we can give you the information. With respect to the announcements, I just need to announce that we did go on record to the City Council in support of the Kona family, is it C-O-N-A? Which was an early family in this part of Tacoma. We'd received a request from the family if we would support their efforts in trying to get some recognition of their early forebears who were important in the development of this part of Tacoma. So we got that in, and we got a nice letter back from the family thanking us for that. We also have now submitted in our annual report, and I'd like to thank Kyle, who did most of the heavy lifting on that report, but we finally added the extra little pieces that Jody and I had added. So that is now in. That is one of the, I think that's almost the only requirement that we have from the city for them to give us our funds for the year. So now they've received our annual report. If that's in order, we will now get funding we get $4,000 from the city that we can use. I think, Jody, you had an announcement about the South End. Do you?
I did.
So how are we going to, we need to work out how to get.
So there are 8 neighborhood councils in Tacoma, and one of ours is South Tacoma Neighborhood Council. And they have been working for over 2 years on looking at how to improve their neighborhoods. And one of those efforts has to do with updating the comprehensive plan. And they've come up with, for their area, to do an economic green zone. So that's going through the process of being looked at by the city council. There are comments that you can make, and I'm going to have a handout for you that will share what their message is. And I just would like to read the title to you because it's kind of cool. It's finally something to say yes to. And it goes on to say, here's something that everyone can support: promoting cleaner air, protecting water, local jobs, innovative eco-business, preserving green space. And they're asking for you to share your thoughts to the Tacoma City Council. And that information will be put up on our Facebook page. And for those of you that are here, I'll hand out the links, and also you can join via Zoom. So that information will be put up for you all. So I would hope that we could go and look at supporting this other very important part of Tacoma. They have on the equity index tool the city has, they have, the least amount of tree canopy. They have, longevity is the shortest in Tacoma. So they have many different factors because, of course, that used to be an old industrial and light industrial area. And primarily what they're trying to do in this economic green zone is to do something to help protect the aquifer. So Tacoma has a huge aquifer down in South Tacoma. And that is part of what they are looking to do, which is to return that to something that is that's safe and can be a place where there can still be building taking place, but that it would be one that would be protective of this aquifer as well. So that's my update on that.
Any other quick announcements? Okay, the next item we'll move on to is approval of the minutes. We are still working on the April minutes, but we did complete and distribute the May minutes. So if there's no changes, can I have a motion for the approval of the May minutes? Have a, so Brad and Jody, any discussion? All in favor of approving the May minutes as submitted? Aye. Thank you. And Treasurer's report, back to you, Jody.
So not a lot has changed. We started out the year with our amount of 14,242. There have been some small expenses that have come in. And right now we are at a total of 13,008. But 4,000 that is always kept in reserve. So not much to report there.
I think that's the treasurer's. We'll move on to liaison.
Question?
Oh, I'm sorry, question.
Remind us what the money is used for.
Well, it's used for a number of things. Well, part of it is community outreach, and the other part is community support. And then we have many different things relating to the technology that we use to maintain our website, our Facebook page, so on and so forth. Yeah.
Any more? Okay. Moving into liaison reports, I'm going to work my way through the people that I can see. So I'll come back to you if I miss you. Please just interrupt. But Chris, from the fire department, I think you're up first, if that's okay.
Hi there, can everybody hear me okay? Sounds good, Chris. You can hear me? Okay, good. So this month we are focusing on the fireworks again. Hopefully we have a safe 4th like we have the last few years. They haven't been like they were back in the 90s. So things have been a little calmer the last few years. But I did put some information in the chat box about a phone number and the $513 fine and the confiscation of the fireworks. So there is a phone number there, and then you can go to the South Sound 911 website for some more information on that, on how to report fireworks. Please don't call 911. You get referred over 911 to the fireworks hotline, and TPD will come and solve the problems as they can, as they have units available. And you know, we're all fighting staffing right now and trying to stay staffed. So please be patient, and we'll do the best we can. So any questions?
Yes, a question.
What is the fireworks number?
Yeah, you're gonna have to repeat the question.
The question is, what is the number for the fireworks report?
It is 253-287-4455.
Repeat that one more time, please, Chris.
253-287-4455.
Any more questions? You're monitoring the questions through the, okay. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, next one. Now I've got to get. Next one is Lonnie.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. This is Lonnie with Pierce Transit. Thank you for having me at this meeting today. It's nice to see everybody. It's a very good turnout. So I have a few Pierce Transit updates. So in Gig Harbor, the Route 100 will be adding another stop this summer. And although we won't have the trolley out there this summer due to lack of bus drivers, we are adding another extra stop in Uptown. Also, we are offering the Summer Youth Pass, and it's good from June 1 through August 31st. And it's a 3-month pass for those who are 6 to 18, and it's for only $36. Also, for those of you who are using the Orca card, we have rolled out the new Orca system on May 16th that rolled out a few weeks ago. So it's a mobile app, and it has an improved website to manage your account. And it has the ability to instantly load value and products onto your Orca card. Another thing we're promoting is our van pool service. So we have a fleet of van pool vans at Pierce Transit. You just need 3 people to start a van pool van. It's a perfect time to start a van pool van, as we all know how high the fuel costs are. And fuel is included in your van pool fare. Also, something, probably the most exciting thing, thanks to funding provided through the state legislature's Move Ahead Washington transportation package, youth ages 18 and under will ride fare free on public transit this fall throughout the region. So all kids or youth ages 6 through 18 will ride free come this fall. And lastly, we are hiring, probably like everybody else, we are hiring bus operators. Also, we're hiring for our public safety team, our maintenance team, and we also have administrative job openings. So I welcome your questions, and I will put my contact information in the chat, and I look forward to connecting with you.
Questions for Lanny on transit? I think we're letting you get off easy this month, Lanny. So
Thank you.
I think we're good.
Okay.
Okay, next, let's see who else I've got. Leslie. Is Leslie with the port, or am I got the wrong Leslie? Perhaps not. Wrong Leslie, my apologies. Do I see any? Oh, yes, police report. I'm sorry, are you lieutenant, captain? I'm not sure how to introduce you, Mr. O'Keefe.
I'm Lieutenant Stephen O'Keefe. I'm the new North Sector Commander.
Yeah, please welcome to our group, and
Thank you. So does anyone have any questions concerning the new restructuring or reorganization of the North End? That's been a foremost question in some of the groups. All right. So 2 major items in 1300 South Puget Sound Avenue. Our CLOs responded to several complaints of human habitation related to a broken down SUV across from Franklin Park. Contact was made, and the occupant of that vehicle stated he and his family had finally received some help with housing, and they will be clearing within the week. And the other major thing we did at 1726 North Mildred Street, the CLOs received more complaints regarding code violations and ongoing drug activity. Our CLOs went out with code compliance, who are working on identifying the responsible parties for the property after the former owner has unfortunately passed away this year. And the CLOs are contacting some of the neighbors and relay the current status of property and to answer questions. Follow-up is ongoing. Any questions about that? Anybody?
You got a question, John?
I don't know if Craig knows about the restructuring of the North End and the South End CLO programs, but if you describe what happened.
So the question, Lieutenant, is could you describe the restructuring of the CLO? Could you talk about the restructuring of the CLO program?
Sure. So previously, the city of Tacoma was split into 4 parts, 1, 2, 3, and 4 sectors. Chief Moore has decided that community policing will be restructured into just the North Sector and the South Sector. So the North Sector will be comprised of the former 1 and 2 sectors, and the South Sector will be the 3 and the 4. So I have the North Sector, and your South Sector commander will be Lieutenant Jeffrey Katz. At this point in time, I am down approximately 5 CLOs. Officer Michael Johnson has been promoted to the rank of sergeant, and he has been transferred to operations. So that leaves me with 1 CLO who in the former 2 Sector, Anna Braz, who has also been tasked to help out in patrol with training. And these 2 days, she's actually been helping out with the defensive tactics cadre. So we've got her stretched pretty thin. We're doing the very best we can. We're trying to get another CLO to replace Officer Johnson, but it's been a bit of a slow process.
I've got a quick question for, what was the motivation and the rationale for the restructure?
Chief Moore believes that this restructuring going north and south will be a bit more efficient, certainly a bit more streamlined. As you know, before in each of the sectors, it was 1 lieutenant who was directly in charge of the community liaison officers. Now it is 1 lieutenant, a sergeant, and our community liaison officers. And also in the north end, we also have the homeless outreach team and our MHP and DCRs working. So we're going to try this. We don't really know if it's going to be all that effective. It seems that it's working out pretty well, but like I said, I have 1 CLO where I should have had 4.
So a question, Lieutenant. So our communication would come directly to you for
You
all
can
of our
contact me
issues?
directly. I think you have my email, so you can
Yes.
contact me directly.
Okay. And then, Joe, you had a question?
I think I saw something on the news just before I left the house about some kind of an incident at Mason Middle School. Do you have anything on that?
I believe that was just the shutdown, the Masons School. We don't have I didn't have any kind of a briefing on that as yet, but I will get to that information as soon as I do find out tomorrow. I'll send that directly to the group.
Thank you. More questions for the Lieutenant? Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us, Lieutenant. And
right.
we'll, as I think I explained at the beginning, we're still learning how to work these hybrid meetings. So by next month, perhaps we'll be a little bit better organized. So thank you.
I think it actually went pretty well. I think you've done a good job.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right. Oh, also, I should mention, we are still down approximately 60 patrol officers. And we are doing the very best we can to get our hiring, get our numbers up there. We're hiring heavily with the lateral officers. The $25,000 hiring incentive has actually been pretty effective. We're doing a lot of in-county laterals, which are giving us the biggest bang for the buck. Chief Moore has told me personally that he does intend to hire 100 officers, but it is a very slow process. So please bear with us. All right. Any other questions concerning that?
Referencing that, with those officers not in post, what are we losing in regards to services and protection in the city? Is there anything that we have to opt out of because of that?
We are doing the very best we can to provide the services that we provided before. But the only thing that you're probably going to notice is longer response times. We simply don't have the manpower, but we're working. Also, the traffic division has been devastated. I believe they're only down to 4 motors. And like I said, here in community policing, we are down approximately 3 CLOs. All total, I should have 8 CLOs, but I only have 3.
Well, thank you for your response, and we really appreciate your service.
Well, it's not doom and gloom. I mean, we are, recruiting is picking up, and, we're doing the very best we can, but it will take a bit.
There's a question from Georgette. How many officers are now employed in our city?
We have a total manning of approximately 319 commissioned officers. And we should be up over 400.
And for everybody's information, Chief Moore has accepted our invitation to address us. So our September meeting will be focused on policing, and we will have Chief Moore here to give his presentation. So that'll be quite exciting for us.
Yeah, well, you'll like him. Chief Moore's a very dynamic speaker. He's a good man.
Any other items, Lieutenant?
No, that is about it. The only thing I can say is, we're doing the very best we can. Please bear with us. And we're just hoping to get our numbers up as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Have a good night.
I have two more items on the liaison front. We did get a message from Alyssa at the Parks Department, who was unable to come here tonight. She sent me a report which will get posted on our website or Facebook. She addresses various items, the bond update, the Tacoma Nature Center being closed, Sarah Playground closed for resurfacing, updates on Point Defiance Marina buildings. She lists the outdoor concerts and festivals for the summer, talks about the free summer lunch program, and talks about the Venedas Circus. So if you have any interest in those items, go give us a couple of days and you should be able to find them on our website. The other item that we have is we are going to be adding a new liaison, and I'd like to introduce Lowell Wise to introduce himself, who's not going to be giving a report this time, but Lowell, do you want to just introduce yourself and explain who you represent?
Yes, thanks so much for the invitation. I'm Lowell Wise, Executive Director of Tacoma Tree Foundation. You may know our work. We're out in the community educating people about our urban forest and giving people resources, including free trees, which we distribute periodically. And we also plant trees in public spaces and different parts of Tacoma. So I'm really excited to be here at this meeting. A lot of our work is in Hilltop, Eastside, South Tacoma, and South End, because those neighborhoods have been invested less in the past. And as a result, they have lower tree canopy coverage. So we focus our efforts down there. But I'd also just like to mention that parts of the North End have lower tree coverage than the city average. And so there's work to be done in the North End as well. Tacoma has the lowest tree coverage of any city in the Puget Sound region. So we're trying to change that. And I'm just happy to be connected with you all as part of our neighborhood-based efforts. So thanks very much.
Thank you,
And I'll be
Lowell.
giving a longer report, I think, in a couple of months when we have urban forest as a focus.
Yeah, and thank you, Georgette, for introducing us to Lowell and getting him connected with us. And we will be devoting one of our meetings is August to the subject of tree canopy, and Lowell will be one of the presenters on that.
And I'm just going to put my website and email address here in the chat.
Okay, and yes.
Okay, where can we go to get our trees?
Great question. There is another website called treesfortacoma.org. But the answer is that we're usually out in the community doing tree giveaways in the spring and in the fall when it's more adequate for planting. The summer is kind of a hard time to plant a tree because it takes extra watering and so on. So we've got information on our website about our events, and you can contact us directly to find out when we have our tree giveaways.
Perfect. Thank you. And I jumped over Liz. Firstly, thank you so much for hosting us here tonight, Liz. And do you have anything to report on?
I would just want to report that I'm wearing my mask because I am fully vaccinated, but trying to model excellent citizenship behavior. Just didn't want to make anybody ask me to put it on, so I thought I'd leave it on as long as we're sharing microphones. Thank you. So, am I getting feedback? Is that okay, Brad? Okay. Thank you all for being here. We're just so pleased to be able to welcome North End Neighborhood Council back in person, and much respect to the board and to Steve and to Peter, or for Brad and to Peter for making this happen. I don't know how to run this machine, but I know you do. So thank you all. And if you do have any questions at all about events on campus, please feel free to reach out to me. I can say we are hosting a blood drive June 28th with the American Red Cross here on campus. So if you would like to volunteer for that, we would love to have you. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Liz? I would just like, please pass on to the IT staff how wonderful they are. Brad and I came in this afternoon and they were just wonderful in getting everything set up. So
Oh, thank you.
Specifically, Logan was incredible.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
Very, very astute. A question for you, Liz, this is from Sarah. Does UPS have any info on when the Alder Road construction and paving will be complete? We know that you are not paving, but you might have an idea.
I wish I did. I'm sorry, I don't have that. I will look into it though and share what I find out.
Okay, great. Thanks, Liz. Any other questions from online? Please feel free to unmute yourself or comment directly in the chat. Any other questions?
and I think that's it. Liz? Oh, somebody has their hand up.
Smalls, feel free to unmute yourself. Let me ask you to unmute yourself real quick. Okay. Maybe that is a residual hand, Smalls. We can just keep moving forward.
Okay. I think that completes the liaison reports. Thank you very much, all of those liaisons. We're now going to move on to our city council reports. And I'd first like to call up Sarah. Do you want to come up and we'll try and get the camera more on you? Why don't you switch places with me and we'll swing the camera around. I'm asking, Sarah sort of got quietly elected and we sort of slipped into this position without us properly congratulating you and welcoming you. So this is your opportunity to explain everything.
Okay, hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Rumbaugh. I'm the district representative for District 2. And I don't think I've been in person with you ever. So this is really exciting. Yeah, so we do border District 1. And so I'm really, a lot of times I like to say that I like to show up when Councilmember Hines can't show up and he shows up when I can't show up. So I just want you to know that you get two people who really care about this community instead of just one. I also want to just kind of talk to you a little bit about things that I really care about and things I'm working on. Just so you know, I'm on the Community Vitality and Safety Committee. And so we were working on what it says, community vitality and safety. And so we've been working on homelessness. We work on human services issues, things that actually can't believe this, but they are things I'm really interested in. And they kind of coincide with things that I work on in the community. I'm the president of the Associated Ministries Board. So I really care a lot about what's happening with homelessness in our community. Secondly, I'm on the Government Performance and Finance Committee, and Councilmember Hines chairs that, and he's been a really good guiding light for me as far as like learning how to look at budgets and realizing that those things that we do with Tacoma Public Utilities, those are really important, and how we look at you as customers and a part of our people we serve. I think that's really what I've learned a lot about in government performance and finance. I also want to talk about some issues that I really care about. Commencement Bay is one of those things. And as we talk about the South End and the concerns there with what people feel is really important and been sort of left to not given the attention it should, Commencement Bay has also been that. And, you know, just so you know, it was a super fun site at one time. And I met with Department of Ecology today because I had some questions. I had heard, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to have Department of Ecology come to your meeting to talk about the Occidental site. I think that you should. They will come and give you they'll come and give you a talk about it. They came to the Northeast Neighborhood Council meeting a couple weeks ago, and I was there, and I was supposed to go to one at the port. And I'm so glad I was at my neighborhood meeting because they gave a talk about what's happening with the Occidental site. So the Occidental site was an old chemical dry cleaning site. And in the 80s, it was shut down. It was a super fun site. And Department of Ecology has negotiated on our behalf as citizens to find a way for them to pay to clean up the Occidental site. Now, I wish it was so simple to say that we can just go out there and clean it up, but it's not. The pollution is down below in the water. It's in a plume, and it's moved out of the Hylabus, which goes along parallel to Marine View Drive, and it goes out into Commencement Bay, and it's about 150 feet down, and it has contaminated the groundwater. And so they're trying to find ways to pump that out, and it's going to take years to do this. I've talked to some of the scientists there, and they're sending me more information, but this is something that I think that we need to make more important. And I think that the citizens of Tacoma need to know this is going on. And we need to make sure that we hold Occidental responsible for making sure this gets cleaned up. That no matter what happens, we as a city realize how important Commencement Bay is to our future. And I just behoove you to pay attention to what's happening at the Port of Tacoma. They're really important to us because they're economically one of the largest. They bring in a lot of money into Tacoma, and they do great stuff for our city. At the same time, there have been some bad users of our port and of our tide flats. And so paying attention to that's really important. And I'm just here today to tell you that I am paying attention as a council member, but I also need you to stand up as well and just be like, go to the Department of Ecology site, look up the Occidental cleanup, invite them to come. I have the information. You can have them come and they'll give a whole presentation. It's really well done. So I'm here if you have any questions. And I'm sorry to have like such a depressing story, but I also think it's like really great that we're getting it cleaned up.
So any questions for Sarah? Yes, we have one over.
So we also hear about the North End Treatment Center and that it is old, it has not kept up with the times that they had over Chambers Bay. I didn't know if you had any updates.
Oh my gosh, are we going to talk about poop? Because if you are not signed up for my newsletter, you can do that on my website for the city under Sarah Rumbaugh, because my next newsletter is all about poop. So thank you for bringing that up, Jody. That's so amazing. Well, so we do actually have a treatment, our North End treatment facility plant. And actually we have the North End one and we have the Central treatment plant, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the Central treatment plant. So yes, our Central treatment plant cleans to secondary level, and it's really a fabulous facility. Our environmental services department is fabulous at the city. I'm going to just like tell you they're really great. Yes, could it be updated to tertiary? It could. Tertiary means it's so clean that you could drink it. And that's the kind, and that's going to be necessary over time, that the water that goes out into Commencement Bay is actually that clean. Can that happen today? Probably not, because it's really expensive to build something like that. And even if we bond it, we still as citizens have to pay for it, because the way things work is whatever we build, it has to have a rate that pays for that. So it would mean higher rates for citizens. So we need to get to that point, and that's something that we're working on. If you saw in the paper there, we do have a suit with the Department of Ecology, so I'm not sharing anything I can't share. But we're trying to like work out a solution with Department of Ecology so that we can continue to provide the service that we have now at the cost that we have. So I know we have a plan for upgrading it. It's not going to happen this year or in 10 years, but hopefully it'll happen soon. So it's something I'm paying attention to, and I really appreciate that question, Jody.
A question just came through online. You've actually addressed some of this, but I'm going to share the whole thing. Who is leading the effort to hold Occidental accountable? Is there a group forming to work on this? Also, who in ecology is working on this? Which department?
Well, I can send you all the information about Department of Ecology after this. I'll make sure I get it to you. I mean, you can see all the different people, but Department of Ecology is under, there is an act that we passed in the 1989, and I can't remember, it's got a really great acronym, but it was about toxic cleanup. And based on that, they've done the work they're supposed to do. And they actually go out, I didn't know this, they go out and identify sites that they think are toxic and then test them. So they're always out there on our doing due diligence for the citizens of Washington State, looking to make sure that there aren't toxins in our community. And if there are, we get them cleaned up. So I would say the responsibility fell on the Department of Ecology, to have Occidental pay for it. And they are, it's all set up for Occidental to pay for this.
Joe, you have a question.
I know John's going to roll his eyes at this. With Home in Tacoma and the apartments, we are not collecting impact fees or discharge fees from new development. So the new development that's coming to the city, those builders are not paying anything to support the additional sewage capacity that's going to be necessary, either from the big apartment buildings or even from Home in Tacoma. As my email to John said, everything rolls downhill and builders are not paying their share, and the cost of upgrading the plant capacity is going to fall on the rest of us. Is the council looking at adding impact fees for all new development in the city?
Oh my gosh, you're so ahead of everything. Yeah, we are actually, as a city, looking at impact fees. And I'm sure that's going to be very contentious, but I was a city planner at the city of Kent, and I do support impact fees. I think that if you want to be able to develop in our city, we for a long time have given you like the opportunity to do it at low cost. And as a city that's growing, as we are, we've had 1,400 new units of multifamily in downtown just since January that have been approved by the council. We are going to have to think about these things. They're really important. All of the services you're talking about, not just the sewer, but infrastructure in general, just like all of those things have cost to them. And we're going to have to find a way to afford that. So now can I just like make that happen myself? I'm going to need Councilmember Hines' help. We're going to need the help of the rest of the council to come up with some solutions to that. But impact fees are one of the things that we could do.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Joe. Just one comment on the port. We normally have Leslie from the port.
I wish she was here today.
She's not here today, but she normally is. And I would just say I did the Earth Day tour of one of their environmental sites. It was fabulous. It was really impressive to
Our
see.
port is doing some
what
really
they were
great
doing.
stuff. They are.
So
And I also want to give Lowell a shout out there, talking about tree canopy. We are one of the lowest tree canopies in the area of the 8 large cities. And I think every time we develop something, we should be thinking about what tree canopy we're removing and how we're going to reestablish more tree canopy. I live in Northeast Tacoma, and if you look at the map, we have the highest level of tree canopy besides Point Defiance. However, all of the land that's left over right now is critical area, and they're looking at developing much of it. And so we need to be really conscious about what that means for the future of our city. Tree canopy is tied to like clean air and better areas for children and more open space for people to use. So I mean, it's really important when you have a good quality city like Tacoma to be thinking about things like that.
thank you for advertising our August meeting.
All right.
So thank you, Sarah. John, would you like to come up and give your report? I think we're just going to have people stand at the lectern. Makes the most sense.
Actually, I got another question for Sarah. Sarah, can you come up just for 1 second? Sorry, John.
No worries.
Okay, one more question. This is it, last question. The Jeanette Garden that was funded with major help from the NENC, the current sewer replacement project that has gutted that area at the top of the gulch needs a commitment to return to vintage style street lamps to the general Jeanette Garden site. Last heard, there has been no commitment to return it. Any comments on that?
No, I'm gonna say that, I mean, they've probably been talking to someone in our public works department, and that's probably where that question should be addressed. I don't have an answer for that.
Great.
So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So, John, we're very happy to see you in person. We hear you had a encounter with COVID.
Like many, can anybody hear me? Am I on the microphone?
John, if you just bring it maybe up to your face just a little bit more.
I'm a little taller than
There we
Councilman Rumbaugh, so we'll just do that. Yes, like many people in this community, COVID has affected a lot of our homes, including my own, but I'm feeling much better right now. And I'm also vaccinated and boosted and done all the right things, but just kind of where we are in the world today. So some brief updates. Thank you, Councilman Rumbaugh. Did a wonderful job of giving a lot of really good updates. I'm just gonna give a couple, since I don't know if there's anybody from the city manager's office, I'll do a quick update on the what's on the agenda going ahead. So at our council meeting tomorrow evening on June 7th, we have 2 things that may be of interest to people here or listeners. We're having the public hearing on the proposed amendments to the comprehensive plan, which I think Jody had mentioned about the Southwater Groundwater Protection District as part of, and the South Tacoma Economic Green Zone are two proposals that are being mentioned as part of the comprehensive plan update. So there's a public hearing during our council meeting tomorrow that you can call in and provide comment on that. There's also a public hearing on our 6-year comprehensive transportation improvement plan. So I talked to many of you about specific streets, specific sidewalks, specific roads that you want to see updated. And the city has a 6-year comprehensive transportation improvement plan. So all these projects get put onto a kind of a 6-year list or 6-year program. So the current one we're talking about is 2023 to 2028. And then what that allows us to do is then go out for grant funding for those projects. So once they're on the sheet, we're able to work towards that. I don't remember quite off the top of my head what projects are in the North End Neighborhood Council area. There's some in District 1. Two that pop into my mind right now is they're looking for, in partnership with Metro Parks, updating the Hidden Beach Road to Titlow Beach. You know, there's Hidden Beach over there. So there's a road that goes over it that used to go to the Tacoma Outboard Association building. It's you can't really get across in a car anymore. In long term, Metro Parks would like to make the Hidden Beach into an accessible beach for people. So that's one of the things that's on the 6-year transportation plan. There's lots of other things. If you're interested, I can send you the link to that. Another thing we're talking about is just a rule change. Now that even though COVID is still with us, we are making some changes about our return to in-person meetings at the council level. So we're going to be allowing the council chambers to return to full capacity after next week. We're also moving all of our committee meetings, the council committee meetings, like the Government Performance and Finance Committee that I chair, to meet in person. We're going to meet hybrid. So the intention is all of the council meetings are going to both have an in-person and hybrid component. So if you can't be there in person, our goal is you can always still participate virtually, like the Northern Neighborhood Council meeting this evening. So there's just kind of a couple of things on the agenda for tomorrow. Some things I think might be relevant for you folks. Tidy Up Tacoma is returning for its 2nd year. And if you're in District 1, the Proctor, Narrows, 6th Ave, and Ruston, not Point Ruston, but the Ruston mixed use centers are going to be addressed in July. And then again in August. That means they're going to come through, they'll clean up the trash, they'll address some of the beds, kind of clean up the area, part of an ongoing keeping Tacoma clean. I am excited that I think as part of the budget process going forward, we're going to talk more specifically about a long-term plan to keep trash and litter picked up in the city of Tacoma, which is something I've heard from many of you. So I'm excited for that. And then I'm trying to think if there's what else I want to add. I think those are kind of the bigger ones that I had in my mind. Another topic. Oh, there we go. I'm looking at my notes here. Another thing is we at study session tomorrow, we're going to talk about Vision Zero, which I've talked to many of you about pedestrian safety, speeding cars and things like that. And so at our study session tomorrow, we'll be talking about Vision Zero and how we get traffic fatalities down to 0 by 2035. That's the goal at this point in time. So there's no pedestrian deaths by 2035. We'll be talking about things like lowering the speed limit in residential areas to 20 miles per hour, lowering the speed limit through some of the mixed use centers to 25 miles an hour. So currently Proctor is the one mixed use center that has a 25 mile per hour speed limit. I don't know if you knew that or not, but Proctor's at 25. All the rest of them are at 30. So the talk is going to be about lowering the mixed use center speed limits to 25 miles an hour and Proctor potentially to 20. So those are some of the conversations we're going to be having tomorrow. Other than that, I'd be more than happy to answer your questions or any questions people have here. I can also answer some of the questions that came to Councilmember Rumbaugh, but she did such a wonderful job answering them. But happy to be here. Great to see people have legs and full bodies and everything. So excited to see people back in person.
Questions for John?
So John, you also sit on the Infrastructure Planning and Sustainability Committee.
I do.
And I see on the agenda that this Wednesday, 2 items that are of interest. One is the historic districts conversation. We're sitting here abutting next to the College Park that is under nomination, currently being reviewed by the Planning Commission.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to comment on that. And then I also saw that the design review process was being reviewed by Division Manager Brian Boudet.
Yes. So the conversation in IPS around historic districts is kind of an ongoing series of conversations about historic preservation in the city of Tacoma. So the first meeting was just kind of a background on what historic preservation looks like. The meeting on Wednesday is more specifically about historic preservation areas or districts like the North Slope, the Wedge District, and some of the other ones we have in Tacoma. As part of that, we're going to talk about the College Park Historic District and where that fits into that conversation. That's currently with the Planning Commission. So they just finished their public comments. They took public comment last week, I think, on Wednesday. And so that is currently where that is sitting, is with the Planning Commission kind of making their decision about the College Park. It's already gone through the Landmarks Preservation Commission. It's now landed at the Planning Commission. And then if it moves past the Planning Commission, it will move on to the City Council for final approval, similar to what happened with the Wedge District or some of the other historic districts here in the city of Tacoma. Yeah.
The public be allowed to ask questions during the IPS meeting, or is that?
We do not take
Not yet.
questions during IPS, but we do take public comment.
Okay.
So that's a great question. Yes, we don't take public questions during that. But we do take public comment during all of our committee meetings. Yeah.
Okay.
To go back to Joe's question, he asked to Councilman Rumbaugh about impact fees. If you were paying attention, please, I hope none of you are all watching the council committee meetings, but if you were, our council committee meeting 2 weeks ago, we talked about Home in Tacoma and all of the pieces that are kind of coming out of Home in Tacoma, all the things we have to address. So many of you may have followed the Home in Tacoma process, phase 1. Was kind of a talk about the general map and then a list of all the things the council wanted to see addressed before the zoning change happened. So that included design review, that included impact fees as part of that conversation, tree canopy cover, historic preservation, infrastructure impacts, all sorts of stuff that was there. And at our infrastructure planning sustainability meeting 2 weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, time just flies by right now. We had a conversation about kind of breaking apart some of those pieces into the different council committees so that we can kind of address them at different, address different parts of them through different groups of council members. So one of the things that is potentially that is supposed to be coming to the Government Performance and Finance Committee is impact fees and how we look at the budgetary impacts of the growth that we're seeing in the city of Tacoma. So that is something we're going to be talking about. We have a consultant that's looking at impact fees right now. It's going to return a final report to us here by the end of the year, and then it will move on to council conversation after that.
Councilmember Hines.
Yes.
Great report. I like the idea of the speed limits in the city in some areas moving down. One thing I've noticed, I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but if I drive 30 miles an hour in Tacoma, I have someone typically on my tail.
Yes.
Trying to go about 40 miles an hour. So the 30s are really 40s. Is there anything that we can do if we do change these speeds to actually enforce the speed limit? And I know there's like a 5 mile an hour grace, right?
Yeah.
But it seems in Tacoma, at least it's more like 10.
Yeah, no, so that's a great question, Brad. There's kind of a range of options, like I guess would be like to address speeding cars, right? So the one way historically we've tried to do that is through kind of police enforcement and ticketing people, right? That we look for people speeding. That's one way that we've always done it. As the Lieutenant O'Keefe pointed out, we have very few officers in the motor unit right now that are out doing that enforcement, and they're often focused specifically on our heavier use arterials, right? So places where we're seeing lots of speeding and lots of accidents. So there's 6th Avenue around that really interesting intersection where Division and 6th Ave and Sprague all them meet together. That's one of them. 6th and Pearl Street. There's lots of places where they are currently focusing where they're seeing lots of accidents, lots of speeding. One thing that we did get passed during the Move Ahead Washington package that I had talked to Joe about and many people here is we got authorization to use more speed ticketing cameras in the city of Tacoma. So the state of Washington will allow cities like ourselves to install 1 speed camera for every 10,000 people in a city. So Tacoma could authorize up to 20 of them. And I see our speakers here, so she could probably talk a little bit about that if she'd like to. But so that's another tool would be to allow these speed cameras. Now, we historically have been able to use speed cameras at red lights and in school zones, but this would be outside of either one of those. That's another way to look at it. If we move past enforcement, Brad, I think that what Vision Zero will talk a lot about is how do we look at streets in a way to design them to encourage people to drive slower, right? So more trees, bulb outs that kind of stick out, narrowing kind of the path, narrowing the driving space. So because when you have narrower sides, people tend to drive slower. I drive pretty slow through Proctor just because it's pretty narrow in there and there's cars everywhere. I mean, no, doesn't help everybody, but it gets most people there. So those are kind of the different pieces we're going to be talking about. So some enforcement, but also a lot of design. And Councilmember Walker is kind of a really big proponent of a lot of that. So she'd be a great person to have come talk to you about those things specifically.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Joe.
There we go. I know that you can't fix this,
Uh-huh.
but I'm going to put it out there because it's a major issue, and that is the air quality in Tacoma, particularly South Tacoma, but also the port. And perhaps speaking to the state, and perhaps the state can speak to the feds, but mobile sources, the emissions from diesels in particular are very toxic. We vastly exceed the level for what's called PM 2.5, which are very fine particles that get in the lungs. And this is what contributes to your asthma rates, your heart attacks, shortened longevity. And I know the city council can't fix it, but I'd like you to think about it.
Yeah. I think that is good. That is a great point. I tell people all the time, I do represent the north end of the state of Tacoma, and I do live here, but I did grow up off of 53rd and Alaska Street, right off of the freeway. And I tell people all the time, if you look at the life expectancy map of where I live today versus where I grew up, I gained about 10 years to my life expectancy by moving to where I live today, right? So we have these real issues and real environmental impacts in our community based on kind of the built environment, especially emissions from vehicles, that we really have to think about, right? Because I work for the school district when I'm not doing this, and we talk a lot about making sure that every kid, no matter what their zip code is, has a chance to succeed. And I think if we take that really seriously, we have to also look at the health impacts too, right? Because it's not enough to say every kid should live in a great school, but not to say every kid should, live in a neighborhood that has healthy air and good quality environments. So I see Peter's standing up to give me the hook.
I am, because we have a speaker tonight.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Speaker tonight. So. I always thought on the air quality, if we moved all the smokers into the bad areas, it was like they've already killed themselves.
Oh man, I don't know. I don't know if policy wise that would work, but thank you all. And you can always email me if you have further questions. Have a wonderful evening. I'm off to soccer practice.
Thank you so very much, John. It's my pleasure to welcome our speaker tonight. Speaker Jenkins is going to give us a report. I'm going to try and pull up the PowerPoint that you shared with us. We're almost there.
You've already outperformed me.
This is our first time doing this. So that looks like slideshow. And I think you can just hit enter each time and then you'll be good. So thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
And the forum is yours.
I'll take my mask off while I'm talking, and it's good to be here tonight. I'm very dressed very informal because I had like a bunch of things today, all of which required, anyway, I ran out of time to dress up to see you. So my apologies. I'm going to try and give you all a little bit of kind of what happened this session. And I'll try and go fast, but there's a lot of things that happened this session. So I'll try and go fast and then be open to questions. I'll just start off by telling you a little bit about me. My name is Lori Jenkins. I've represented this area for 12 years in the legislature. And I live between Proctor and Westgate. So you're my neighborhood council. And I'm happy with all the work that you all have been doing. I was elected Speaker of the House in 2020. I was Speaker of the House for 7 full days before the first coronavirus case in the nation was diagnosed in Kirkland. So I would just say that thus far, my leadership as Speaker has been very dominated by the pandemic. And I'm looking forward to next session where hopefully we won't be dominated by the pandemic. And so this session, really, we had the chance to really focus on working families and our small businesses that were having real difficulties because of the pandemic. And so we really focused on trying to make sure that we weren't leaving anybody behind. Washington State has a fairly long history when we go into difficult economic times, where people who went into those times doing okay tend to come out of them okay, but people who go into them really on the edge and not doing okay come out much worse. And we were really committed to not having that happen with the pandemic. So this is just a quote from the opening day of session. And I just wanted to show you how session started. We intended to start with a pretty robust people being there in person during session, and then the variant Omicron happened, and we had to immediately go back to a fully remote session. We'd done that before successfully, so session started fully remotely, but we were able to move people back onto the floor for the first time in 2 years at the end of session, and that was really important for me and for my caucus to do, because we felt like we wanted to show Washingtonians that we could move out of this. And obviously we've moved even further since then. I also want you to just know that I am one member of a 3-member team of legislators from the 27th district. That's me with Representative Jake Fye, who is the chair of the House Transportation Committee, and who brought us the transportation package this year. Jake was a real leader on that. It also means that when whoever said that I can answer, John said I could answer all the transportation questions, probably not so much. Jake can answer them better than me. And it's great to have him as chair of transportation in the district because he really takes on leadership of those transportation issues. And you may not recognize the person on the right, who is your new state senator, Yasmin Trudeau. Senator Trudeau was appointed just before session started because Jeannie Darnell, our longtime senator, took a job working on justice issues at the Department of Corrections and is now the director of women's prisons for the Department of Corrections. And Senator Trudeau came in really very skilled and ready to move forward. And she was vice chair of the Senate Law and Justice Committee, and also happens to be the first woman of color to represent the 27th district. So we're happy to have her. You might not be able to tell in the picture, she's due to deliver her second child in the next week. And you would know it if you saw her. You would absolutely know it. So let me talk about the 4 priority areas we have, and then I'm going to go through those priority areas and talk a little bit about what we did. So they were strengthening the economic well-being of Washingtonians, serving Washingtonians better, and then 2 that were carryovers from the prior year, and which we will probably focus on for many, many years to come, because it took us a long time to get to where we're at, and it's going to take a long time to shift. And those 2 areas are advancing racial equity and justice and addressing the climate crisis. So I'm going to talk both about policy issues and budget issues in each of these areas. First thing is our big focus areas, at least some of our big focus areas in the economic well-being. We're bringing down healthcare costs. So for example, we advanced a bill on charity care. Every hospital in the state of Washington will provide charity care for people who are 500% or more. It's always hard to know whether you say more or less of the federal poverty level. But and so that will help people. We also brought insulin costs down, $35 for a bottle of insulin. We started off at $100 a couple of years ago and have moved that down. There's something called surprise billing, where sometimes you go to the hospital and you get cared for by someone who is not in your insurer's network, and you get a surprise bill. So we prohibited it. Well, we addressed surprise billing as another policy area. We did a ton in higher education this year. Any of you who have kids or grandkids who are in college, you know the incredible costs of that. We have something called the Washington College Grant that allows an incredible number of students in Washington to go to college free with the college grant. But one of the things we saw is that many of those students were foregoing the college grant because they had childcare costs or they had transportation costs, other things that couldn't be covered in the grant. And so we provided for a bridge loan or excuse me, a bridge grant that students can use for those kinds of things in the upcoming year. It's also really sad. Washington State is either 49th or 50th, depending on the year, in terms of students filling out financial aid forms that get them the college grant, that get them this bridge loan. And so we actually also invested in more help in high school to help students fill out that student financial aid form so they can actually access this grant. And then finally, we passed a 1% student loan program that will be a revolving fund, but students should be able to also get the lowest student loan in the nation right now, a 1% student loan. And that was with the $150 million that we invested here in the state. We did a lot for our small business community also. Our small businesses really were hurting through the course of this pandemic. And so you may have heard of the business and occupation tax. We did a revision to the business and occupation tax that will mean 125,000 small businesses in Washington state will either not even have to file for the business and occupation tax, or they'll get a huge lowering of their tax rate as a result of the work we did there. We also, one of the strange things that happened during the course of the pandemic, right, is for how many of you are small business owners or business owners? Anybody? So one of the things that happens is your unemployment insurance is set partly by the number of people that how regularly you lay somebody off from your business. And so for all those businesses that were shut down during the pandemic to try and prevent people from getting a coronavirus, their rates would have gone up because they laid off all these people, right? So we backfilled all of that, or most all of that, so that our businesses wouldn't have huge increases in their unemployment insurance rate, was another thing that we did. And then we also cut liquor license fees. We paid the liquor license fees for some of our hospitality, for all of our hospitality industry, to help them, again, be able to stay on their feet. And then I've talked a little bit about these, but in terms of economic well-being, especially for our business community, the hospitality industry was hit particularly hard, and we invested $100 million in trying to help get our hospitality industry back on its feet. But the other thing is our cultural organizations, our arts and cultural organizations were really shut down for a lot of the pandemic. So we invested money there. And then beyond the pandemic, you may remember that we had huge flooding up in northwestern Washington in the Bellingham and Sumas area. And Alicia Rule, one of our members, created a response and resiliency fund to help communities that are faced with things like that. So that's another set of investments we provided. Going on to the second big, so I talked about 4 big categories. This is the second big category, which is serving Washingtonians better. And we did a lot. We did a lot in all these categories, but one of the things I'm really pleased about is you all may have heard about our young people going back to school and how many challenges they are having, the effects of the pandemic, the anxiety that we see in students, and issues such as that. And so for the first time ever, in terms of our definition of what is basic funding for schools, we included school counselors and school nurses. So every school in Washington state will have funding for at least one school nurse, one school counselor. Now, depending on size, they'll get more than that. So one of our pieces of work to do in the future is now we have to make sure there's enough nurses and counselors so that schools can actually hire them. But we do have the funding for that. We also expanded meals in schools. We expanded the retired teachers who come back and teach. We expanded their ability to come back and teach for more hours because we were seeing such a shortage of teachers. And then we also adopted a program to provide for more outdoor learning for our students. And I just want to say, I live fairly close to Sherman Elementary, and I got a packet of 60 letters from 5th graders at Sherman Elementary. And I will quote for you the very first letter that I received, because I will never forget it. It was this young man who, 5th grader, his first sentence, "Why are you treating us like puny mortals?" And question mark. And then every other every other every other sentence was a statement with an exclamation point about why they needed outdoor education. So I'm going to visit them next week, actually, the class, to thank them for their advocacy, because they helped pass that bill. So the other thing I just want to talk about for a minute, and again, I'm happy to answer questions later on, is oh, I wondered whose that was. Is this your cell phone, John? I thought somebody's being awful trusting. How many of you have had a catalytic converter theft in your neighborhood? Right? Nearly everybody has. I have too. And, there's one of the things, so what do you try to do to address this, right? Well, it's already a crime to steal a catalytic converter, right? So you could make it more criminal. Well, the evidence isn't really that that's going to drive down catalytic converter thefts, but we looked nationally at what has been done nationally that has some really good evidence behind it. And one of the things you've got to do is drive down demand for catalytic converters. So we passed a bill this year that requires purchasers of catalytic converters to get proof that the catalytic converter that they're purchasing is owned by the person selling it, right? And that they have both criminal and civil sanctions if they don't do that. So in other states, that has really started to drive down catalytic converter theft. So we're trying to really do some things around smart policing, and we think that'll help. One of the other areas we really will likely apply this kind of approach to is organized retail theft. Some of our larger retailers like, Home Depot, I went there and you could see, they will show me videos of people just coming in, groups of people coming in and in a very organized way, stealing, just going right out to the car and taking things. And it's dangerous for an employee who's not trained to do something about that. But if we think about the third-party market for that kind of theft, there's probably things that we can do there too to drive down that kind of theft. So that's something that we'll continue working on. I work in public health in my other job, so I won't talk about this much, but we definitely advanced public health, making sure one of the things that we saw during the pandemic is that public health had been really vastly underfunded, and that created some challenges for us early on. So making sure that we made strong investments in both public health and healthcare to make sure that people can get the treatment that they need, and working on things like having testing and especially immunizations out there for people. We also provided a lot of rate increases for our behavioral health treatment community, our primary care treatment community, because we were seeing an inability to keep a workforce there, and that was in large part due to very low rates and low salaries. And then finally, we did all kinds of stuff to try to help regular Washingtonians. You see these dollar amounts, but what's really important is the topic areas, utility assistance. I don't know if any of you have talked to Emergency Food Network or any food banks, but the demand for food is really challenging right now, and so investing there. And we also provided money for rental assistance. And then you will see that $500 at the end there for the capital budget for housing needs. That's $500 million to build more low-income housing, to address more housing needs. One of the challenges, though, with building housing, right? If any of you have ever built a house, it takes more than a minute to build a house. Right. So we've actually in the last few years invested huge amounts of money, but it takes a while for those developments to happen and get people in. But we are definitely moving in the right direction there. Advancing racial equity and justice. This has been a major focus area for our caucus and for the legislature. So one of the things that we see, especially in the school community, every parent wants to be very involved in their kids' education, but if English is a challenge for them, it becomes a real difficulty for families to get involved in their kids' education. And especially, we heard a lot of testimony around families where a child has an individual education plan, maybe has some sort of developmental disability. That is very complicated for an English speaking parent to engage and understand, and really help their kid in that situation. And it's even more challenging for families where English isn't their first language. So we're providing increased language access for those families. The other thing is digital equity. It's very interesting. We talk a lot about rural areas not having access to broadband, but it's as big of a challenge in our urban core. And so we did a lot of work around digital equity to make sure that, one, people all over the state have access to broadband, right? That's one thing. Secondly, you need the tools, the computer, the phones, things like that to use the broadband once it's there. And third, you need to have some education about how you use those tools, right? And so we invested broadly in all three of those and created kind of a framework for how we're going to do that. We also, you may have seen an article in the News Tribune that came from the Seattle Times about the Washington State Patrol having a psychologist who was intentionally excluding people of color from the State Patrol workforce for many, many years in his psychological evaluations of candidates. And so Javier Valdez has a great bill that is going to, that will help the State Patrol do better and more diverse recruitment so that our law enforcement community actually looks like the community that they're serving. And then we also did a lot of work on missing and murdered Indigenous people, primarily women who in the Indigenous community just disappear, literally hundreds in Washington State a year and are never seen again. The community is much more affected by these disappearances and really murders than other communities are. So you are going to start to see, very much like Amber Alerts or Silver Alerts, you will see this when Indigenous people go missing. And then we also did a lot of stuff in the budget, a significant investment in what we call reinvestment grants. And these are grants to communities for communities to really engage and decide what they want to do with the funds. So the communities are geographic communities, but these are really focused on communities who've been specifically targeted and hurt by our country's war on drugs. And to try and rebuild some of the damage that's been done to these communities. And also one of the things we saw is when we had our small businesses, when a lot of federal money was flowing into small businesses to help them during the course of the pandemic, we have a lot of evidence that that businesses owned by Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and Asian Pacific Islander communities were not able to access that money. In part, they didn't have access to banks and things like that. So significant investment in the Department of Commerce to help those businesses be more competitive and be able to grow strong. The last area I'll talk about just quickly is addressing the climate crisis. And most of what we did, the big things that we did on climate crisis, we did last year with the Climate Commitment Act and low carbon fuel standards. But it's amazing, everything that we do, everything you think about in your home has an effect on climate. And so we did some work on cleaner appliances and on buildings and on reducing methane emissions. Although I would say that the biggest thing we did was the Move Ahead Washington Transportation Package, which has been lauded as being the most green transportation package in the state's history and probably one of the greenest in the nation. How does it become green? It's because, like you see those ferry boats there, we invest in building 4 new ferry boats, electric ferry boats, right? Where we invest in a transit system. We invest in what's called multimodal transportation, which is making our communities more walkable, more bikeable, more transit oriented. And then the other thing is Jake, the reason I say Jake was really the leader on this package, Jake visited, he had 90 different meetings all over the state of Washington to try and help formulate this package. And what he heard consistently is there are definitely places where we need to build new infrastructure, new roads. But what he really heard from people is we need our roads and our bridges maintained. We need maintenance done on them. So this package is really more about maintenance and operations than it is on building new infrastructure. And then the other thing is a huge portion of the funding for this comes from from the Climate Commitment Act. And again, part of the Climate Commitment Act is really looking at communities that have been historically disadvantaged by our transportation packages and looking at ways that we can invest in those communities and address some of those issues. We have an example right here in Tacoma. When I-5 was built, the east side of Tacoma was completely cut off from the rest of the city. That was a conscious choice, but you can also see some of the things that have happened to the east side of Tacoma because they don't have access to all kinds. It's much harder for them to get into town to do a lot of things. So that the east side of Tacoma might be a place where we would have some additional investments to try and address. I mean, obviously, we're not going to rebuild I-5 in a different way, but there are things that we can do to help mobility on the east side of Tacoma and help families there. So that's, I'm just going to talk just a little bit about our capital budget, which is the budget that, so the first set of slides, that was about the operating budget, right? Funds schools, funds behavioral health, funds all kinds of things like that. Then I just had a slide on the transportation package. That's a different budget. Jake really oversees that. And then our third budget is our capital construction budget. The capital budget builds really buildings and infrastructure, sewer, things like that. These are just things that were invested in this year in our capital budget. Primarily, the biggest investments in our capital budget were really housing investments all over the state. So we invested close to $1 billion in different types of housing investments. But we also got investments for the Recovery Cafe and up in Northeast Tacoma, the Dash Point Pier and Swan Creek Park, which is no longer in the 27th district, but we didn't know that at the time. I still would have supported it because I love that. But anyway, those are some of our capital investments. So I really want to open it up for questions. This is our office phone number. My legislative assistant's name is Faith Flaherty. You can call anytime and she will try and respond to your questions, and or you can email my office and we will do that. So those are some highlights of what we did this session. I'm happy to try and answer questions. I may have to tell you that I will research it and get back to you, but.
The money you spent for or designated for housing, is that going to be used to support things like housing trust funds versus, and because there's been a lot of reports, and here in Tacoma, we've had a lot of discussion about the tax abatement for multifamily units, which hasn't produced much housing in any of the places it's been used. So the money now is going to go to housing trust funds to keep, there are various models.
Yeah.
But that you end up with essentially either permanent lower income housing or below market housing or shared equity kinds of designs. So that's where the money is going?
Well, so about 150 million goes into the housing trust fund. A significant portion of that, I don't know what the dollar amount is, but we're building, you may remember other times when I've been here, we've talked a little bit about Western State Hospital and about how that is not a successful model for treatment of people who have behavioral health issues. And so this is to build, there's also money there to build 16-bed facilities around the state. So that people can be treated, people have mental health issues that need a place to live can be housed in the community that they live in where their support is. So there's some there. And there's actually, for the first time ever, where the Department of Commerce has some funding to actually do home ownership for assistance for people. One of the things we know in the racial justice and equity issue is the reason that many families of color are poor is because they have been aced out of the ability to own a home and to develop wealth through the ownership of a property. So that won't be focused simply on communities of color, but we are for the first time trying to actually help people doing home ownership also. So there's a mix. There's a mix in that nearly $1 billion of those things.
In the emphasis on digital education or access to digital, is any of that money going to libraries? Libraries are often the core of digital education for people who otherwise don't have access.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question but I would say last year in the budget, a fair amount of money went there because we had all of these, I mean, all over the state, we had parents who were driving their children to libraries to try and get a link so that their kids could do school in the car. And so we actually provided funding last year to libraries, one to strengthen their Wi-Fi networks and also to try to, once we reopen, to be open longer and be able to have more capacity there. So I don't know if we invested even more this year or not, but we did do that in last year's budget.
On policing?
No. Yes, you can.
There was a lot of finger pointing between the police departments, the sheriff's departments, and the legislature following some legislation 2 years ago. I think there was a fix made in this last session. Has that resolved it, or is there still some tweaking that needs to happen? And how do you see it going? It's frustrating from an observer's point of view to see two parts of government, the elected part and then the police departments sort of pointing fingers at each other. It doesn't seem very productive.
Yeah. So I think the answer is yes, some things have been solved. No, everything hasn't been solved. So let me start off just by talking about what it is that the legislature is trying to do. What the legislature is trying to do is to make sure that law enforcement has the tools they need to protect everybody in Washington. And law enforcement is really a local community effort. So we're trying to make sure that law enforcement has the tools, but we're also wanting to make sure that law enforcement is held accountable when they violate public trust. So that's the balance that we're trying to achieve. And I think that we'll continue to work on that balance for a very long time. But we did do a number, like, so some of the bills that we did, for example, last year, we had a bill that all of law enforcement agreed on. We had worked very heavily on it. And no one, law enforcement, the legislature, nobody quite realized that this was about prohibiting use of certain weapons. And we didn't realize that we had prohibited the use of a firearm that shot beanbags, which is a lower, right? That's a less damaging thing than a bullet. So you want law enforcement to be able to use a beanbag. So right, we fixed that this year. We also had, even though the AG's office said there wasn't any issue with this, that it was still allowed by the bill that we passed, we had some law enforcement agencies that said, no, we can't go out to any community caretaking calls and pick up someone who's in a serious mental health crisis. We didn't. Anyway, there was disagreement on the interpretation of the bill, but we were like, that's fine. If you want to, if you want us to clarify that, we will. So we clarified that one. I think the one that right now is still on the list is vehicular pursuits. And right now the legislation says that it's a balancing test. One of the things that we know is that vehicular pursuits are very, very dangerous for every neighborhood that one goes through. We have a state senator who has a cousin who was killed as a bystander in a vehicular pursuit. We also have law enforcement officers who've been killed in them. So there has to be a balance. Like, why are you pursuing someone for who asked the question about a speeding ticket? Like, is it worth it to pursue somebody for a speeding ticket when they're very dangerous? Probably not. So law enforcement under the current law is asked to balance what is the thing that you're considering pursuing somebody for, and then they have to get authorization from their superior in order to do a pursuit. I think there's still some issues of concern. Like, when the bill was passed, we weren't really seeing these smash and grabs where people just drive a car through a business and pick up an ATM and carry it away. So I think that's a piece that we're still going to need to work on to figure out the right balance. And then the last thing I'll say is, we invested $20 million in training for law enforcement officers. This year, we also invested in training dollars last year. So we'll be able to offer half again as many classes at the Criminal Justice Training Commission for local law enforcement officers and state patrol officers to get more folks trained well to be out there. And that was something that law enforcement asked for. And then the other thing is we're having real challenges retaining law enforcement officers. And so we did a really big move on law enforcement pensions, which is about a $600 million investment over time to help retain law enforcement officers that we that are recruited locally. So so anyway, if folks hear about defunding the police, they may be doing that somewhere else in the world, but we're not doing that in Washington State. So. Other questions? Well, it's a pleasure to serve you all. Please do reach out to my office if you have questions. I'm very happy that I can be out in community more. So don't hesitate to stop me if you see me out. Mostly, you don't have too much of a problem with me speeding anywhere because I try and walk everywhere if I can. And I'm not speedy in my walking. But feel free to stop and just say hi and ask whatever questions you have, or email me. But it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for your work.
Safety.
Yeah, I know it's a great.
What's the agenda? Okay. Thank you so much. Old business. Do we have any items of old business we need to address? Any items of new business that we need to address? There being none, I think we're going to be actually getting out early this week. So thank you. Those of you that attended in person, thank you very much. It was great to finally see people in person. And those of you that joined in Zoom, if you've got some feedback as to what went well and what didn't, please just reach out to us. You can either drop us an email or pick up the phone. This is a work in progress. And we really appreciate University of Puget Sound for hosting, allowing us to have the meeting here. And I think overall, it was a good start. So we have one last question.
Will our next meeting, if there were on the screen to raise up, will it get yes also?
Yes, our meetings, we will be going with this hybrid meeting going on. So we'll be meeting here. Most of the time we're able to get this room. If we can't get this room, we'll make sure that we hand guide you to wherever the meeting is. But this will be our home going forward. But we still want to keep the Zoom option available for those people that are not comfortable in coming out in person. And so thank you very much.